So these are warming stripes for the top line is the global air temperature, the middle line is the Scotland air temperature, and the bottom row is the Atlantic water in the Fair-Shetland Channel. And these warming stripes were a visualization developed by Ed Bookings at Reading University as a kind of impactful way of starting conversations about climate change. And I really hope that if you take anything away from this in your outreach, you start trying to use these climate stripes to get the conversation started. So they don't really have any numbers, or but they do have underlying data and physical meaning. And you can definitely see that in the global signal. We can see a clear trend of global warming. In Scotland, that trend is not so linear, and when you then look at the Atlantic water in the Fair-Shetland Channel, you can kind of see that ocean variability, especially on the decadal scale, being reflected in the air temperature records as well. Okay, so the quiz has questions in 3 themes. First, there's some general questions on climate change. Then there's a set of questions on behaviours and actions to reduce our impact on climate. And finally, there's a bit of a selection of questions from the Scottish Marine Science Research community. And no one took up my advert on Twitter, so I've just put themselves forward. So I've just kind of made some choices along the way. Okay, so as a bit of a warm-up question, let's start with an easy one. Who is this lady? Is it Greta Thunberg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or Marie Skłodowska?
Kudos for the pronunciation there, Bee.
Thank you, I did look it up. Okay, so hopefully most of you have clicked an answer, so I'll just give you a 5-second warning here. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, great. All of you got that right. This is, of course, Greta Thunberg. And she's a Swedish climate activist, rose to fame in the most recent, I think it's 18 months since she first kind of appeared in the media. So very swift rise to fame. In case anyone wondered who the other 2 names are, Marie Skłodowska is also known as Marie Curie, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg is one of the US Supreme Court judges. Okay, so we've kind of everyone's up to speed with the media attention to climate change and the climate activists of the day, but do you also know some of the facts and figures of the latest measurements and reports? So our consumption of fossil fuels is increasing the atmospheric CO2 concentration, but how much is that concentration currently? So we measure at Mauna Loa on Hawaii, and the question is, what was the average atmospheric CO2 concentration in 2019 observed at Mauna Loa in Hawaii? Was it 114.14 parts per million, 411.44 ppm, or 444.11 ppm? So it's taken me a long while to say all those long numbers, so hopefully you've all voted. So let's close the poll in 3 seconds maybe. And if you can close, thank you. Okay, and the answer here is 411.44, so answer B, and 3/4 of you got that right, so that's great to see. So all had the same number of 1s and 4s. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but the order of those 1s and 4s does matter. And so the average concentration in 2019 was 411.44. The observatory at Mauna Loa actually started measuring in 1959, at which the concentration was 316 ppm. And the concentration at the start of the Industrial Revolution is estimated from bubbles trapped in ice cores to be 280 ppm. So we've clearly had a quick rise in CO2 concentrations, especially recently. So let's keep that warm-up going. As this is the MASTS webinar, let's move into the marine environment. And the atmospheric carbon CO2 concentration has increased as we've burnt more fossil fuels, but how much of that has been taken up by the ocean since the 1980s? So Hannah's going to launch the poll for you. Is that about 1/4, about half, or about 3/4. And I'll give you another few seconds here. 3, 2, get your answers in. 1, let's close that poll. And there we go. So about 40% of you thought half, and then about 30 and 27%, 1/4 and 3/4. So actually, according to the latest published work from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in their special report on oceans and cryosphere in a changing climate, it's very likely that the ocean has taken up between 20 and 30% of total anthropogenic CO2 emissions since the 1980s, causing ocean acidification. So I've mentioned ocean acidification. And so we know that atmospheric CO2 concentrations have increased and that the ocean has taken up a significant proportion of this. So these increased concentrations of CO2 in seawater cause a reduction in pH, so ocean acidification. But what is the pH in Scottish waters? And I should say, in case anyone wonders, it's the North Sea Scottish waters. So it's the question Hannah will launch will be, what is the mean spring pH in April to June in the northern North Sea eco-hydrodynamic region? Is that 7.19, 7.69, or 8.19? And meantime, I'm going to try and bring up my little chat window. I had that somewhere. See if anyone's chatting whilst they're okay. So let's close that poll and let's see how everyone's done. So about 40% of you, 43% thought the B answer 7.69, and then about 30% either side. Let's just make gross oversimplifications here. Right, so the answer is 8.19 pH units. So at Marine Scotland, we measure pH at our observatory in Stonehaven, which is part of the Scottish Coastal Observatory. And that contributes to the wider UK observing efforts. And work published by Sue Hartman and colleagues in Progress in Oceanography in 2019 showed that the eco-hydrodynamic region covering the northern North Sea, which includes Stonehaven, had an average pH of 8.19 units in springtime. And this is actually when pH is the highest, so the ocean is the least acidic, and the minimum is 8.09 in October to December time. The paper published the kind of current state of the seasonal cycle in UK waters, but in order to get long-term measurements of ocean acidification, you'll need to sustain these observations. Okay, right, let's move on to the next question. So our emissions of greenhouse gases are not only unbalancing the Earth's carbon cycle, they also have an influence on the Earth's radiation budget. And the oceans play an important role in this too. But how much of the excess heat in the global climate system has the ocean observed to date? Is it less than 10%, about half, or more than 90%? 5 more seconds to think about that. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see how everyone did. So about half of you thought half. About 16% thought less than 10%, and about 37% thought more than 90%. And the correct answer here is the top answer. So more than 90% of the excess heat has been absorbed by the oceans. And that was a result published in the latest IPCC special report on oceans and climate in a changing, oceans and cryosphere in a changing climate, which was published last September. Okay, so as warming oceans also have a larger volume due to thermal expansion, and warmer air and sea temperatures will also increase the melting of glaciers and ice sheets. We will see sea level rise, so rising sea levels. And the question here is, what is the projected sea level increase relative to 1981 to 2000 for Edinburgh, which is why I have a lovely picture of Edinburgh, by the end of the century, so 2100, for a high emission scenario? And your choices here are 0.08 to 0.49 meters, 0.3 to 0.9 meters, or 6.61 to 1.1 meters. Okay, Hannah, let's close that poll in about 3 seconds, please. So 3-second warning for everyone. Right. So 40%, a little bit over 40% of you thought center answer, and then again, a bit of a split on the other two choices. So the MSIP sea level rise paper was published earlier this year. And in that, they summarized the UKCP 18 marine report estimates that sea level in Edinburgh will rise between 30 centimeters and 1 meter, so the center answer, by the end of this century, under what is called the Representative Concentration Pathway, or RCP 8.5, which is a high emission scenario for the IPCC projections that are done. Increasing sea levels will actually put our coastal communities at a greater risk of coastal flooding and coastal erosion, so they are important. And the IPCC actually project that the global mean sea level rise at the end of the century will very likely be in the range of 0.61 to 1.1, so answer C, by the under a high emissions scenario. So that was a little bit of a red herring, not a red herring, but that was another semi-correct answer, but it's a global projection. I'm just going to check in with Hannah to see if we're all doing, are people finding answering easy enough? You can see people.
Yeah, okay, everyone seems to be figuring out the polling
Okay,
answer, so that's fine, don't worry. Nah, you're doing grand.
Great. So we've come at the end of the first block, which is has all been questions about the kind of current state of the climate and the projected changes. This next block is all about lifestyles and lifestyle choices. So from climate plans to climate action, everyone has a role to play. So whether you're a politician, a business, a researcher, the government, or even as an individual, we all have our contributions to make. And obviously there are questions about where that balance lies between our organizational ambitions and responsibilities, but also our personal and private lives. Everything we do has an impact, some on climate, and some are small, but some are also quite big. And so the next couple of questions are kind of to trigger you to think about how much you know and how we can, as a society, most quickly transition to a low carbon economy. And do you know what measures we need to take that will make the largest difference? So the first question is all about our smartphones. The production of a pair of running shoes causes between 13 and 14 kilograms of carbon, the CO2 emissions. But do you know how much that is for the manufacturing of a smartphone? So this is just the manufacturing process that we're focused on here. Is it about as much, twice as much, or 10 times as much? I'll give people a little bit longer to think about some of these questions because there may be a little bit more reasoning or arguing with yourself to be done, conferring. So Hannah, let's close the poll in about 5 seconds, please. Great, thank you. So the majority of you, 3/4, thought it was 10 times as much, and about 1/4 of you thought twice as much. So there's only one person who got this right, and I hope this is not the one person who's phoning in from Belgium who's had the test session on Sunday. I know who you are. So the actual correct answer is about as much, surprisingly. So The production of a smartphone is estimated to cause around, the manufacturing process of a smartphone is estimated to cause around 16 kilograms of CO2 emissions. And the devil is in the detail here, because actually the majority of emissions of smartphones is in the sourcing of materials, so the rare minerals that go into all the nitty-gritty chipping and fancy screens. And that causes also associated problems of land degradation and mining. So if you would like to consider or reduce emissions from your mobile, then you should consider buying refurbished ones. Another one is that if you text rather than call, it's more efficient or less carbon emitting. And you could consider extending your contract if you have one, so you don't always get a brand new phone every 2 years or whenever the contract runs out. And I should say the devil was in the detail there in that manufacturing process, but the total emissions would have been estimated between 40 and 80 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. So that would have been probably about 3 times as much as the shoe. And in the shoe, the manufacturing is actually the majority of the amount. Okay, right. Let's move on. Next question. So we know that appliances use energy when they're in use, but in standby, many still consume a certain level of power. And the question here is, relative to full use, how much does a computer display in standby use? So if you just unplug your laptop and walk away and your computer screen goes into standby, how much does that still use? Is it less than 100, around a fifth, or around half? And this is your 5-second warning before Hannah closes the poll. Okay, so the majority of you got that question right. The correct answer was around a fifth. And the Energy Saving Trust actually estimates that on average, a person could save £30 a year by remembering to turn off their appliances from standby. Now, I realize that that may seem like very little to an individual, but if we each did this individually, and especially if we all did this in our offices, then we could start making some significant contributions there. Okay, let's move on to water. I realize that in Scotland, especially on the west coast, where some of you are based, we have a lot of water. But if you would like to live more climate conscious and reduce how much water you use, what action would save you the most water? So out of these actions, which personal action saves you the most water? Is it not showering for a month? Eating 1 steak less this month if you eat steak, or imagine you ate steak, or replacing your daily can of a soft drink with a glass of water? And Hannah, if you close the poll in about 5 seconds for me, please. I'm quite sure people have a bit of time to think about that one. Okay, so again, the majority of you got that right. About 60% went with answer B, which was to eat 1 steak less a month. So saving water is important, even in Scotland. And while every little helps with taking less showers or drinking less cups of tea, the majority of our water footprint is actually in the production and consumption of goods and food. If you, during a month, your showers will consume about 1,500 litres of water. To manufacture a month's supply of soft drink would probably save you, or if you drank 1 can of soft drink less, that would be 750 litres a month, but actually the production process of 1 steak is 3,000 litres. So that would have been the most impactful decision here. Let's move on. We know flying's bad for our climate, but say you still want to take a plane to go on holiday to lovely Thailand, which is this picture. Once this is all over, all this corona crisis lockdown is over, we can all go to Thailand together. But if we did, what would we need to do to compensate for the CO2 emissions of our flight? It's a return flight calculated for one person. Would it be that we'd need to go without energy, electricity and gas for an entire year for the entire family, assuming you have a family of about 3 to 4 people? Go without meat for an entire year, or go without a family camping holiday from Scotland by car to the south of England? I'll give you a little moment to think about that, whether you would go without electricity, go without meat, or go without that family camping holiday in the south of England. And Hannah, let's close the poll in about 3 seconds, then, please. Okay, so 18 people got it right. It would be to go without energy for the entire year for the entire family. So even though air travel only contributes about 2.5% of the global carbon dioxide emissions, the rapid growth of the industry and the increase in emissions in the past 5 years was 32%. So it's estimated that by 2050, air travel could contribute up to a quarter of the global carbon dioxide emissions. And passenger travel is actually about 80% of that number. So if you would still like to use energy for the upcoming year, which I'm quite sure most of us would, then you could alternatively decide to become vegan for 4 years to offset that trip to Thailand. Okay, so we've covered that flying has some impact, or has an impact. But if you do want to live climate conscious and you do still need to fly, when is the best time of day for climate to fly? Is it in the daytime, in the nighttime, or does it not matter? So if you do decide to fly, when's the best time of day to fly for climate reasons? Is it daytime, nighttime, or does it matter? So Hannah, if you close the poll in a little while, I don't know if you can see what percentage of attendees has answered, but if most have, then please go ahead and close the poll. Oh, okay, people are split here. So some of you said daytime, 8 people said that, and then about 21 of you each decided either the nighttime or that it doesn't matter. It actually does matter, and it's in the daytime that would be the best time to fly. Planes leave behind condensation trails. These are the kind of white tails that you see behind the plane on a clear day in a blue sky. And these create complex feedbacks in the greenhouse gas effect because they create clouds. And in the daytime, these reflect the incoming solar radiation, which has a bit of a cooling effect, and so they reduce the negative impacts of flying. And the IPCC actually estimates that the CO2 emissions can be doubled due to these contrails, or these tails, during the nighttime. Okay, so many factors influence climate and climate change, and some are more surprising than others. On a global scale, which of the following measures would have the largest influence on CO2 emissions, or on reducing CO2 emissions? Would it be to plant more bamboo, to educate more women, or to make cities more pedestrian friendly? So on a global scale, which of these measures would have the largest influence on reducing our CO2 emissions? Would it be to plant more bamboo, educate more women, or make our cities more pedestrian friendly? And just a few more seconds for you to decide. Go. Okay, just over half of you got this question right. So it is to educate more women. According to Project Drawdown, the effect of more educated women is 7 times greater than that of planting more bamboo, and 20 times greater than having more pedestrian-friendly cities. And this is mainly because women who are in school longer, on average, have less children. And the project actually calculated that that would be equivalent to having 360 million less cars on the road if more women were educated. Okay, so Reducing our greenhouse gas emissions can be part of every facet of our lives. And if you would like to reduce your carbon footprint as much as possible on an annual basis, which of these measures should you choose? So it's relative to each other. Would you commute 1 day per week less by car, assuming your work is 20 miles away? Become vegetarian 2 days of the week, or install a solar hot water system on your roof or in your garden? So commute 1 day per week less, become a vegetarian for 2 days, or install a solar hot water system. And again, Hannah, if you just close the poll in a few seconds time, please. Okay, so 2/3 of you went for becoming vegetarian 2 days of the week, and about a fifth of you actually got the right answer, which was to commute 1 day per week less. And that is replacing, so you could replace your commute once a week with a train journey, or you could, or another form of public transport, or you could work from home. And that, if you live 20 miles away from your work, that would save you 400 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions on an annual basis, which is the most impactful out of these three choices. Installing the solar hot water system would save the average family about 200 kilograms of CO2 emissions, and becoming vegetarian twice a week would save around 130 kilograms of CO2 based on your average, the average meat consumption in the diet. Okay, talking of meat consumption, tonight you are hosting a dinner party for the First Minister, and you are keen to impress by choosing a low emissions meat. Which meat should you choose? Should you serve Nicola Sturgeon some pork, some lamb, or some beef burgers? You may want to serve her something slightly more classy than some beef burgers, but you never know, she might really like them. So pork, lamb, or beef, what should you choose as a low emissions meat? And again, Hannah, if you just give people a few more seconds to decide and then close the poll, please. Great, thank you. So most of you went with lamb, but it was a bit split, pork and lamb, and the right answer here is pork. So in a recent paper in the ICES Journal for Marine Science, Bill Turrell compiled a list of the carbon footprint of a number of protein sources from the literature. And for a 40-gram portion of protein, the carbon footprint of lamb is around 8 kilograms of CO2 equivalents, while that of beef is around 40. And pork is actually close to the emissions from chicken, which are around 3 kilograms of CO2 equivalents per 40 grams of protein, which is the average portion of protein consumption. Even better choices would actually be fish, such as farmed fish, farmed salmon, white fish or pelagic fish, or a vegetarian dish. And of course, some of these will also have other welfare or health considerations associated with them. So hopefully you're starting to have a little bit of a light bulb moment, and that's great. But if you do plan to change the light bulbs in your house, what would be the best choice? Would it be halogen bulbs, incandescent light bulbs, LED light bulbs, or the compact fluorescent, which are actually what we call the energy-saving light bulbs? So you have 4 choices here, which on the test session on Sunday threw a few of the participants, but hopefully you're all on the ball. So you have 4 choices to choose from: halogen, incandescent, LED, or energy saving. And again, Hannah, if you just give people a few more seconds to decide and close the poll, please. Great, and an overarching majority of you got that right with the LED choice there. So the incandescent light bulb is hopefully now almost gone from our lives, and although halogen bulbs have made an improvement with longer lifetimes, and the same with the energy-saving bulbs, it is actually the LED bulbs that are a clear choice with 3 times longer lifetimes and than the energy-saving bulb, and also a lower energy consumption. I really hope I can hear a toddler going a little bit berserk in the background, but hopefully that's not being transferred to you over on the other side of this webinar. So my apologies for that, if that is the case. So for the final question in the lifestyle section, we're going to high fashion. Well, not quite. To produce one pair of jeans, how uses as much water as which one of these three choices? Is it showering 200 times, producing 10 kilograms of wheat, or producing 50 eggs? For those of you who want that in weight, it's about 3 kilograms of eggs. So showering 200 times, producing 10 kilograms of wheat, or producing 50 eggs. And again, Hannah, if you just give people a few more seconds to choose and close the poll, that'd be great. Okay, the majority of you decided not to shower, or shower 200 times, but most of you, actually all of these answers are correct choices here, so at least everyone will get 1 point in this quiz. So the production process of a pair of jeans actually consumes a lot of water. It starts with the cotton, which is a water-intensive crop, and dyeing the cotton also consumes a lot of water, as it's often using toxic substances that need to be rinsed out. So a lot of this quiz is focused on the CO2 emissions of things, or the greenhouse gas emission of consumption items, but water consumption of a product will also start becoming more and more important consideration. And a figure to give you some perspective on this is that the average family car requires 400,000 litres of water to be produced. And that is equivalent to showering every day for 20 years. So for some of the students on this webinar, that would have meant you would have showered probably only once or twice in your entire life. After this detour in society, let's get back to Scotland and to the marine environment for the last few questions. In 2018, just over half of the Scottish electricity generation came from renewable energy sources. And energy generation from wind is one of the key contributors. But what percentage did offshore wind contribute in 2018 to the total energy generation mix? Electricity generation mix. Is that 3%, 13%, or 39%? So 3 choices here, 3, 13, or 39, for how much wind came from offshore, or how much energy contribution came from the offshore wind generation. And again, Hannah, if you just close the poll in a few seconds, please. So about half of you thought 13%, 16% of you, so 8 people thought 3%, and 16 people thought 39%. The correct answer here is 3%. So wind overall contributed 39% in 2018, according to the Scottish Energy Statistics database, but offshore wind only contributed just 3%. So the majority actually came from the onshore wind. Planned and installed capacity is increasing fast though, so offshore wind will increasingly contribute to the energy generation mix and help reach the Scottish Government's targets. And the current target is an equivalent of 50% of the energy for Scotland's heat transport and electricity consumption to be supplied by renewable sources by 2030. So that's the Scottish Government's current target or ambition. Okay, let's move a little bit through some publications in the MASTS community now. And it is well established that rising temperatures will lead to smaller body sizes in the marine ectotherms. If you're an oceanographer like me, that just means fish, basically, marine ectotherms. So in the North Sea, the impacts of warmer sea temperatures on the adult body size of fish are already observed, expected by 2050, or expected by 2100. So the impacts of warmer sea temperatures on both sides of fish are already observed, expected by 2050 or expected by 2100. And Hannah, if you just close the poll in a few seconds, please. Great, so the majority of you went with the right answer, which is, of course, that they're already observed. For anyone who knows Alain Boudron and colleagues, they published an analysis of 11 commercial fish species in the North Sea in Global Change Biology in 2013, and 6 of these commercially important species. 6 of these were commercially important species, including herring, whiting, and haddock, that had already shown impacts of warming on reducing the adult body size of the species. So the next question, we're staying with a fishy theme here. So sand eels are an important prey species for many marine predators, such as seabird and fish, but they are also a commercial fishery, and they are also a priority marine feature that affords them some protection under the Scottish Nature Conservation MPA network. As a consequence of increasing temperatures and the related changes in the sand eel's copepod prey, the mismatch between sand eels and their prey is predicted to increase by how many days under a high greenhouse gas emissions scenario? Is that 11 days, 22 days, or 33 days? So the mismatch between sand eel and their prey is predicted to increase by how many days under a high emissions greenhouse gas scenario? And again, Hannah, if you just close the poll in a few seconds. Thank you. Okay, majority of you got that right. It is 22 days is the correct answer here. And so work by Thomas Renier and colleagues published in Nature Scientific Reports in 2019 studied the mismatch between sand eel and their prey, which is Calanus helgolandicus, so small copepod. And it showed that for a high emission scenario, which would project a 1.7 degree warming, it would actually result in an approximate 22-day mismatch between the sand eel and their prey. And this mismatch would result in poor recruitment for the species. Okay, so we're up to the last question now. And so just a final question now. Uptake and storage of carbon by the ecosystems can be an important mechanism to help us mitigate for climate change. Forests and peatland are important land-based stores, and blue carbon, the marine equivalent, is dominated by contributions from mangrove, salt marshes, and seagrass. Mud is often overlooked, mainly because it's not in the official greenhouse gas inventories and reporting. But so relative to peatland, how much carbon is stored in our marine sediments? Is that 10 times less, about the same, or 10 times more? And Hannah, if you give people a few more seconds to decide, and then we'll come to the end. There is one more question after this question, but it's not a thinking question. You need to add up your successful answers. So if you close the poll, please, Hannah. Thank you. So almost half of you, 46%, thought 10 times more, which is the correct answer. And Craig Smeaton from the University of St Andrews with co-authors and Bill Turrell both recently published 2 reports in the Scottish Freshwater and Marine Science Report Series on blue carbon in Scotland. And from this work, it has become apparent that in the top 10 centimeters, our marine sediments store 10 times more carbon than peatland does. And safeguarding these stores to avoid unwanted release of carbon in the future will be very important. Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking part. I hope that went quite smoothly from your end. And there is just one final question. So you need to very quickly tally up your scores, and then I'd be very keen to find out how you all did. So if you can just tally up and let us know which category you fall in.
We'll let everyone a little bit more time, just so
I know, yeah, they'll need to
get all that,
get the calculator and the Excel spreadsheet out.
really quite fun seeing everyone pop in, because I can see them all like put in their
know. So
answers and see the little bars go across.
on the test session we had on Sunday night with some friends and family, I could see that. So I forgot that panel as host you can see that, but not as a panelist. So I couldn't see how many people were already clicking the answers. But thank you very much, Hannah. So
Okay.
is it everyone managed to do their mental arithmetic there? Yeah.
Quite a few managed to get them in, so here we go.
Okay. Great. Wow. Well done. It's a nice bell curve. It looks like on its side. So probably around a third, majority of you, 29% scored in the 9 to 10 category there, and then a few less, but marginally less in the 11 to 12 category. So well done. Well done to those 2 people who scored in 15 and 16 points. If you want to type in your name in the chat, feel free to, and we can give you a shout out. Although I realize I don't quite know how to bring my chat window up. Can you see the chat, Hannah?
Yeah, I can. No one's popped anything in there, but I would just like to say, if anyone's got any questions about this quiz, can you please pop them in the Q&A box, which we can find at the bottom of the screen. Remember, this was a kind of relaxed themed quiz, so not sure how nitty gritty we can go into some of these questions, but
so, yeah, I should say, so I've got one more kind of concluding slide, which is that I hope you all enjoyed this quiz and found it a nice distraction from the current new normal of every day. I definitely really enjoyed this hour, even in my little box office. And I really want to thank Hannah for helping us set this up and for managing the poll. So thank you very much for your help with that. And finally, just a reminder that if you want to become involved with the newly formed Marine Climate Change Forum, then please don't hesitate to get in touch, either through the MASTS directorate email or find me and get in touch with me. One thing is that at the annual science meeting, we're hopefully running a session on climate change as well. So start getting your thinking caps for abstracts ready for that as well. And I'm quite sure Emma and Hannah will circulate more details on that in due course. So thank you very much. And I'll leave up my small print slide to avoid too many arguments, and I'll take some questions. So.
Well, we haven't actually had any questions come in. It's just been a lot of gratitude for the quiz, Bee, and lots of people have had fun. We've had some younger participants apparently having a go at the quiz. And as I said, this quiz was actually recorded and will be on our YouTube page. So if you want to take this quiz anywhere else, you're more than welcome to. And that link will be circulated.
I'm just joking.
And actually, referring to Bee being our new convener for the Climate Change Forum for MASTS, we actually did do a very short interview in the Friday's MASTS casts last week. You featured in that, which is also on our YouTube page. So I chatted to Bee about what kind of instigated the Climate Change Forum and some of the plans that are coming up for that, and the fact that we are still looking for, if there's some people who want to volunteer and be in the forum, if you're a MASTS member or a student with that as well, how to get in contact with Bee about being a part of this forum. And we kind of just discussed very briefly what that's all going to be about. So that's also on our YouTube page. And yeah, no more questions, Bee, I don't think.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone. And I really hope you all manage to, if it is sunny where you are, that you manage to go out and enjoy it and take good care in these strange times.